This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Well, the Brat summer is officially over, and the Thursday Late Late Show is back with new perspectives. Today's guest, a partially sighted leader, will be sharing some reflections on the professional framework and crucial elements it's missing. You won't want to miss this one. It's going to challenge the way you think about leadership. It's going to be a belter.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's show. I'm Chris, and I'm thrilled to have you with us for what promises to be a truly insightful and thought-provoking conversation. Today, we're diving into a topic that's incredibly important, but can be often overlooked as well: the experiences of partially sighted professionals in leadership roles. Leadership is a subject we often discuss, focusing on qualities like vision, strategy, and decision making. But what happens when vision is not just a metaphor, but a literal challenge? How does the frameworks that govern professional development and leadership accommodate, or what could often seem to be failing to accommodate, leaders who are partially sighted in that role? My guest tonight is someone who has navigated this unique terrain with remarkable resilience and insight. He is a seasoned professional with extensive experience in leadership roles, and he's here to share his journey, both the challenges and the triumphs, I presume. He'll also be discussing some crucial elements that he believes are missing from the current professional frameworks, especially when it comes to supporting other leaders like himself. As we explore his story, we'll hear about the barriers he has encountered, the strategies he has developed to overcome them, and the lessons he has learned along the way. We'll also delve into the more broader implications for leadership frameworks and what changes could be made to foster a more inclusive environment for all leaders, regardless of their physical disabilities. Our guests' experiences offer valuable insights into the intersection of disability and leadership, and I'm confident that his reflections will resonate with many of you, whether you're in a leadership role yourself, aspiring to be, or just simply interested in the broader conversation about inclusivity in the workplace. So sit back and get comfortable as we prepare to gain a new perspective on leadership as we welcome our guest, Afsan Redwan. So, Afsan, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I hope you're well.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, no, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
And it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. So, to kick things off, I would love for you to just share a bit about your journey for our listeners, just your journey to where you are today, and how your experience as a partially sighted individual has shaped the path you've taken, and what some of the early challenges you may have encountered along the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think as before I kind of start, I think a disclaimer is quite important as well, in the sense that obviously my experience is my own, and every person who is disabled will obviously have their own kind of story and bring their own experience to the table. I think for myself, this is something which I was born with, so it's something which I've had from an incredibly young age, all throughout my life.
Yeah.
And it is something which has presented challenging and a barrier to me at numerous stages. But fascinatingly though, it's education which has really, for me, provided me with the support needed in order for me to overcome those barriers. So, as an example, at the primary school that I went to, there was a dedicated kind of VI unit, visual impairment unit that was there, um, which supported me in developing my touch typing skills.
Mm.
And this is something which, even to this day, is such a core part of what it means for me to be a professional, and it allows me to kind of respond in a way that addresses and meets those needs. So it allows me to have that kind of efficiency, um, while having still that partially sightedness. And it was fascinating because when I did my PGCE, and I chose to go back to the primary school that I was at, I actually met the learning support person who helped me touch type, right, when I was in primary school, key stage
Oh,
1,
wow.
key stage 2.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful meeting her again and really sharing with her my appreciation and just my gratefulness for all the support she gave me. I was quite a stubborn child, so it was quite
Yeah.
difficult at the time to get me past those hurdles. But it's interesting because it's an area of education that I think gets lost so much sometimes.
Mm.
So, for example, when I was in secondary, again, there was a massive focus on that, on developing those touch typing skills. And at the time when I was doing it, I didn't really understand, like, why am I being forced to learn how to type without looking? Yeah, it's a cool thing that I can, tell my friends about,
Yeah.
or in the early days of my PGC, I used to use it as a way to get the class sometimes to focus,
Yeah.
by just staring at them and typing on the screen. And it actually opens up that conversation for your students as well, in that the journey that you've kind of been on.
Yeah.
Um, Not to say it's obviously exclusive to those with partial sightedness. Is something that I'm sure many individuals can and do. Uh, but it's, yeah, I mean, going into the secondary school again, my secondary. This is, I think, when local authorities were kind of, obviously the major player within education in the noughties, and you had this, the school that I went to had again a dedicated SEN kind of provision on site, which supported learners with additional needs. Um, and again, the VI support there was phenomenal, because when you're sat in a classroom and you're trying to, you're sat, well, number one, you're kind of restricted in where you can sit because you have to sit at the front, because otherwise you can't really see the board.
Yeah.
um, but then even then, though, there are some parts of the board that you can't still see, or you can't really engage with, or your teacher might end up handing you a worksheet that's, below the size font that you can't actually access. So that VI unit was instrumental in really supporting and helping me in developing that resilience and overcoming some of those issues that I faced at secondary. Uh, and then, yeah, then of course the support kind of continued at sixth form and university level.
Mm.
But then something quite interesting happened, in that it sort of dropped after that. Um, and it's almost like, again, I don't want to, obviously, broad strokes and everything else, but it's almost as if you have additional needs up until a certain age,
Mm.
and then past that age, there's kind of nothing there almost. In my experience, anyway. So when I went into um, kind of work, and again, we can touch upon this later in terms of that dynamic between FE and like a secondary school or a large mat. Um, it it didn't really come up much at all, in terms of what could be done around you, and that presented a significantly different challenge, in the sense that, and as you can appreciate, you're sat in a room with 30, 40, potentially 100 teachers, all having CPD,
Mm.
um, and you can't see a thing.
Yeah.
And it's and I mean, you literally can't access the board that's in front of you, or the content that's there. Uh, how do you stay engaged? How do you keep focus? And the other point is also about stigma, right? So usually when you go into like these large CPD events or inset days, you're sat with your department, or you're sat with your colleagues. So if you're a brand new teacher, if you're an ECT, or back then as an NQT, and you're coming into a whole new environment, you don't really have those relationships to feel comfortable enough to go and sit elsewhere. So then this whole thing comes up about belonging and identity, right? And where you
Mm.
kind of fit in versus your needs. And some individuals may sacrifice one because they want to maintain the other. And that was quite a challenge for a number of years.
Absolutely, and I can imagine that. It's a really good point that you say about, as it gets to a certain point, it drops off, and I often wonder about some of my students and how they once they finish sixth form and once they go on to university, how they will continue with their needs. Because I mean, you were talking obviously a few years ago when this was you, but it's still the same now, isn't it? Where do they get them to a certain point, and then that's it, and actually these needs are for life, and we need to we all need to do better, don't we? Whether it's in the workplace or otherwise, to accommodate people's needs. And it's interesting that you say that's the challenge. But the one word I've written down there, Afsan, when you were talking there, is I was nodding away. Obviously, you can't see me nodding, and I absolutely love your story. So I think it's a really interesting story. But you said you were stubborn, and I just it's interesting you've said that, because do you think there was a need to be stubborn in order to get where you are today? Did you feel that stubbornness was a key quality in you?
Yeah, I think at that age, when you're faced with such a challenge, because it's again, it's something which I would describe obviously not as a deficit in me, right?
Mm,
It's
yeah.
something which is a barrier to accessing other things. But that stubbornness really played a strong part in getting me through the day.
Yes.
um, because it was just that kind of uh, determination, right, to keep pushing through. Um, and it did actually come off as, oh, he's just like that, or in a negative, as a negative connotation. But
Mm,
I do feel like what you're saying in the sense that it 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 was it did form a very core part of me
yeah, of
in my
course.
younger days, absolutely.
Yeah, and certainly not. I didn't think of it being negative. I know often you see it as a negative word. You can call someone stubborn, and it can come across as negative. But in this instance, in this sort of setting, I think it's been a hugely valuable part of your your success, really. And so once you had the early experiences, what was your early years of teaching like? Then did you feel that you found your calling, first of all, and did you find that with with your partial sighted that you found your calling? I don't know what word this. So did you find your calling despite this, or did you find your calling because of this, or was it a big feature in your decision to go into teaching and stay in teaching? Because we know teach people don't often stay in teaching. You obviously have, and you've crafted a career out of it. Whereabouts did all this feature in your early years?
Yeah, so that's a really fascinating question. So, um, with so just to kind of touch upon, so there's two areas that I'm gonna
Yeah,
try
of
and
course.
extend. I think the first thing, right, is this whole point about getting into teaching, and for me, I can still picture it now. The history teacher that I had in Key Stage 3 at my secondary school inspired me so much to get into teaching, and that and maybe it was the fact that I was just in year 7, year 8, but I would be sat at the front in his classroom, and when he had this booming kind of voice, right,
Mm,
and when he would recall and talk about the past, and what we'd call retrieval practice and stuff like that now, but he was kind of doing then, um he brought the subject to life for me.
mm,
And I always had this kind of aspect within me wherein I wanted to kind of replicate that to some point. Um, and my science teachers were also brilliant at secondary. Those who taught me, and those who were just in the department and offered extra pastoral support and advice at the time. And that's what really motivated me into wanting to get into teaching. That I thought, if these individuals, if these people are making a significant difference to my life, in that
mm,
they're actually increasing my life chances, my opportunity, um, and allowing me to fall in love with all these different subjects. That's something which I'd love to pass on to others. So that was my kind of the first inspiration in getting into teaching, really. So it was just like many other teachers, I guess, like really boils down to having that kind of environment when you were young,
Yeah.
um, allowing you to fall in love with it. But then the second part of what you said also was quite interesting in that what kind of allowed me to stay. And honestly, like there are numerous examples I could give you of times where I felt like, is this really the right, job for me? Am I in a place that's actually like not causing harm, but am I in a place that's causing a detriment to the learning of the children due
Yes.
to my kind of own the barriers that I face? And
Hmm.
I can't, and I never forget this because I had there was a lesson observation that I did in my NQT year, and although my mentor and the observer were all fine with it, I remember there being a question that was asked to me by one of the children around. So my background's in science. So
Yeah.
as during the practical, there was a question that one of the students asked me regarding the color or some sort of aspect of the chemical that they were testing, and I just couldn't see it, and that put me in a place of like severe doubt as to
Yeah.
whether I should actually remain in this profession or not, because is that actually causing a problem or an issue with the
Mm.
children that are there? And it was a really big reflective moment for me. Um, but luckily, the school and every school that I've kind of been in has allocated a lab technician within the
Ah,
classroom with
okay.
me. And that's when I asked, the lab technician just to come over and have a look and just to double check to ensure that I'm on the right lines, because I couldn't actually access that information to help and support the child.
And was it as simple as that? That just changed it for you. You had someone there, they were able to sort of confirm the color, and that was almost like, okay, actually, I'm not an imposter.
Yeah,
'Cause we all have the imposter syndrome anyway, don't we? And I'm not an imposter. Someone has sort of saved the day, but guess what? I'm going to teach this class, and you move on. And was it as simple as that? Was it that they were there, and that was almost that hurdle overcome, and then you move on? Was it as simple as that? Then do you think?
yeah, no,
Yeah,
precisely. And here's the thing, right? Because the department understood the barriers that I faced,
yeah.
they ensured that I had the support around me to
Well,
progress and to
there you
further.
go. That's what you need, absolutely. I mean, so what you're saying is, in spite of everything that you've done in terms of what you've wanted to do to kick your career on, you obviously owe a lot to a supportive workplace. And I think, you can't, as with all the endeavor in the world, you need a supportive staff around you, don't you? And clearly you had that, which is excellent, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we're going to do, Sam, we're going to take a quick break because we're going to hear from our sponsors. But when we return, I'd be quite like to sort of move on and see how, since you've progressed in teaching, you're now in a leadership role, and you've done some other leadership roles. So you've obviously got over the hoodoo of, or the hurdle of, of your initial teaching problems and, concerns, shall we say. And you moved on into quite a successful career. And it'd be nice to see how you've transitioned throughout the years as well with that as well. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment. Thank you.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Welcome back and to the Late Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson, and I am joined by my guest Afsan, who has been giving us some very insightful information into his career so far as a partial sighted teacher, and it's exactly the sort of thing that we like to talk about on the show. Afsan, it's the the perfect guest for discussing things that perhaps may never be discussed, and the honesty and so far your where you are at the moment with things is just absolutely inspiring. So thank you very much for being with us. I was just interested. So you mentioned that your background is science. So where's your career taken you since your first teaching job?
Yeah, no, thank you. So, since my first few roles as a teacher, I then was a science kind of lead within a primary setting for about a year. After that middle kind of leadership, I then moved into a senior leadership role at an independent school, where I was the assistant head for a number of years. We went through 3 Ofsteds in that time as well. I supported and co-led the school through 2 of them.
Wow.
And then post that I then have now transitioned into an FE college where I'm a leading learning and teaching coach for the group.
3 Ofsted. Wow, that must have been tough.
Yeah, it was. I so remember the last one that we had, which went fantastically well, by the way.
Oh, good.
Um, uh, I remember I was in Parliament with the students, having a workshop and taking them around, and I get the call from literally from the school office telling me, "Ofsted on the phone, what do we do?" And then
Oh, dear.
we literally had to rush back, and then that whole night obviously was spent planning. I mean, you know the story, Chris.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one thing being at your desk, it's another being in Parliament or wherever and getting the call. Yeah, because they're coming no matter what, aren't they? So you want to get back and get sorted, and you want to get prepared for. But to say the last one went really well was excellent. So that's good to hear. I mean, so throughout this time, how was your experience, do you think, different as a partially sighted leader? Do you think there was much difference?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think being a leader, so there's again, it's the multifaceted, right? I think being a leader has really provided me with the agency for change.
Yeah,
Being at the table allows me to talk to governors, exec, VPs,
yeah,
leaders across the room, as well as those who are part of wider networks as well, and
mm,
really talk about how we're going to engender change within the organization, and really support our colleagues and our peers. So, for example, at the moment, as well as the learning and teaching coach, I'm also the one of the diversity coordinators for the college group that I'm part of, and my
yeah,
strand is on disability. So it allows me to have conversations with individuals, wonderful individuals like yourself,
mm,
as well as branching out to other networks and talking about what the members of the organization are facing and ways in which we can transform that. And I've got to really give like appreciation to the college group I'm part of, because EDI for them, it's really the core part of who they are. And it
mm,
allows leaders like myself to get in the room, have those conversations. I don't have to now ask someone to provide me with the slides beforehand. I can print them off myself.
yeah.
I don't need to ask anybody to adjust the meeting agenda minutes or the notes or the paper. I can do that myself. So it really has given me that added agency to ensure that that any barrier that I face, I can kind of overcome that.
So is this a is you say the group they do this? Is this because your group have taken the initiative to do this, or would you find that you could go to another college or not necessarily college, but another institution, and they would have these measures in place? Is it that consistent elsewhere, or do you think that's the problem with the framework?
So again, that's a brilliant question. I really feel, and so this is something which I didn't really consider until I had joined the FE college, and as someone like as yourself as well involved in FE. So within the FE college group, we have an EDI strand specifically for staff members, from
Mm,
which we then have like a group director. We then have multiple strands that cover all the various aspects of EDI, all the protected characteristics and beyond, and really then kind of drill down to how we can support staff across the group. To my knowledge, and it could be that I'm I'm a bit outdated here, and I haven't been in a mat for quite a while, or a secondary setting for about 2 years now. So as far as I have an understanding of this, a similar kind of process doesn't really exist within academy settings or within kind of other settings. That's not to critique them, but I
yes,
just don't think the capacity isn't there at the moment.
yes, yeah,
Because I remember when I was having concerns with my previous in a previous setting, I was informed to go to HR, for example, and talk to them.
mm,
There wasn't actually like a VP specifically for EDI strands within, across the trust or something.
yeah. So it's more that they've put this in place for you because you're there and you need it, rather than, it's there for whenever somebody comes in that position, really. So it's more like that, you would say. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, is 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 that where? So do you think that there's an opportunity? I mean, I don't know if I don't know how ambitious you are about this. I would imagine you're very, very ambitious about it, given how passionate you speak about it. But do you think there's an opportunity for you to progress this in the framework, or do you think there's a network of people that maybe be able to, to put this to the DV in terms of addressing the framework? Do you think that's there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel, this is the other point, right? I'm quite lucky to be part of a college group, which is one of the top 10 largest in the country.
Mm,
So with that, we have influence and we
yeah,
can make change. And I feel that if we shout loud enough, people will listen to us about um, changing the framework or adapting the framework even, and
yeah,
adding in these points. Because the thing is, within the classroom environment, we have high leverage strategies that we use that
mm,
should be part of our day to day. Why is our professional framework not high leverage? It should be such that it's integrated already within it, and it's not an additional thing that's needed. So, for example, those of us who are disabled persons and are part of that, every day is a challenge for those individuals.
yeah,
The same exists in all other individuals and people too, in the
yeah.
sense that they go through challenges. So the idea of resilience as being an additional point, um, as part of teaching professional frameworks, I think is essential. In that we need to have an added layer of resilience and really explain what that means for teachers. It's
Mm,
not so. For example, like myself, I'm not due to my partially sightedness, I'm not able to drive at all.
yeah.
So straight away, in terms of where I can work, the networks I can get to, what I can do is limited. There's restrictions on that. However, I haven't let that stop me in terms of wanting to progress and develop further and influence other areas. So that's an aspect of resilience, right? As well
Yeah.
as flexibility that's there. So I feel as if being part of this kind of college group and the wider FE space would allow some of these conversations to maybe permeate, throughout, and we can come up with an idea. My absolute one of the end goals that I have with this role as one of the disability coordinators, is to try and put together a college-wide network of disabled persons across the UK, if not
Yeah,
the South at the very least, and really try and put together a conference or some sort of event where we can come together and really celebrate our successes.
absolutely, absolutely. I just, that sounds like such a. It sounds like something that shouldn't hopefully be too far in the future for you to achieve, because who's not going to want that? It's just getting the right coverage of it, isn't it, and getting the right attention to the right people to get it done, really. But that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick news break, but when we return, we just like to tap in a bit more about this, really, and perhaps maybe look into how this impacts professional development and other aspects as well. So we'll be back shortly and we'll continue the conversation.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC News reports on the uncertainty over the future of vocational courses, with over 450 schools and colleges in England saying they are unsure which courses they can offer in 2025. The government is conducting a review of post-16 education, and the Department for Education says this will support BTEC students. But the results of the review will not be out until December. This means schools and colleges are unsure which courses they can offer students in September 2025, despite having open days scheduled in the coming weeks. 450 schools have written to the government saying that the uncertainty is making it extremely difficult to plan for the future. Not only can they not tell prospective students which courses will be on offer, they can't tell staff either. More than 200 vocational qualifications, including BTECs and other post-16 courses, were due to be scrapped under the previous government, but days before the first funding changes were due, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said there would be a pause and review. The 455 schools and colleges in England have joined the Protect Student Choice campaign, a coalition of 25 education organisations and unions. The review comes against a backdrop of issues that have plagued the rollout of T-levels, introduced 3 years ago. Ms Phillipson confirmed T-levels will continue, despite high dropout rates and issues with exam boards. Schools Week highlights the names of the 12-strong panel appointed by government to review the curriculum and assessment. It follows the appointment in July of Professor Becky Francis, the Chief Executive of the Education Endowment Foundation, to lead the review. The panel includes Academy Trust Chief Executives Cassie Buchanan and Dr Vanessa Ogden, SEND consultant Gary Orban and exams expert Professor Joanne Baird. It also includes Reach Foundation Curriculum Director John Hutchinson and Funmilola Stewart, who leads on equality, diversity and inclusion across the Dixon's Trust. Professor Francis said, "We have ensured that primary, secondary and post-16 sectors are represented," and added that alongside its call for evidence due to launch in September, The review would engage and consult with crucial stakeholder groups and work closely with education staff on the ground. Full details of the panel can be found in the article on the Schools Week website. Hundreds of students are set to miss out on Freshers' Week because their accommodation will not be ready. This is according to BBC Bristol, which says Bristol University brought forward Freshers' Week so students living in the new Bedminster Metalworks block will struggle to attend events as the residence will not open until the 14th of September. The university says the 819 students affected will be compensated and has offered £250 and promised extra events. But student union officers say the news leaves a sour taste. Legally binding contracts for the new accommodation mean that moving in date cannot be changed. The university brought the Freshers' Week date forward after a review of its academic year. In Wales, record numbers of pupils are being educated out of mainstream schools according to new figures. The figure of 2,279 is more than twice what it was in 2009-10 and 28% higher than before the pandemic. The Welsh Government said since the pandemic there had been an increasing demand for provision other than at school, including for physical health and mental health, as well as issues such as anxiety. The figures released do not include those educated outside of school due to parent choice. This has also been rising. Full details of this story can be found on BBC Wales. Finally, The Guardian reports that cleaners at a prestigious UK girls' school have won a dispute over pay and conditions. A strike that was due to take place next week has also been called off. The group of cleaners belonging to the United Voices of the World, a grassroots trade union for low-paid migrant workers, voted to strike after the school's contractor wanted to reduce their working time from 43 to 38 weeks a year, but offered only a £1.55 hourly pay rise in return. After the vote and appeals from teachers and former students, the contractor offered more pay, annual increases, and to meet the London living wage from next year. Whilst the James Allen's Girls' School, known as JAGS, declined to comment, it is understood that former pupils distributed leaflets about the strike and called on the school's leaders to set a good example to its pupils. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Well, welcome back to the Late Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson, and I'm here with my guest tonight, Afsan Redwan, who has been sharing his insights into his experience as a partially sighted teacher, first of all, but then also moving into leadership roles as well. So welcome back, Afsan. I just wondered if you, just while the break was on and just listened to the bit of the news there, got me thinking, what was the application process like for you when you were, when you were applying for roles? Because there's that option, isn't there, to tick buttons or click buttons or tick, which whether it's paper or otherwise, asking about disabilities and how much of a challenge is that, do you think?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris, for the question. I think early on in my career, I was very hesitant about saying yes, that I have got a disability.
Yeah.
Because in your mind, psychologically, whether it's something that's, obviously I can't speak for others as well, but for me anyway, psychologically, there was that tension between, well, am I going to get the interview just because I've said yes? Or is it actually based off of my experience and my CV? Because obviously at that stage, you're not really, speaking to the school kind of, you're still going through the application process. For some schools, there's an opportunity to obviously go in and talk to them, but others may not have that kind of facility. They won't want to do the application process first and then talk to prospective candidates. So very early on in my career, I think for the first kind of 3 or 4 years, I didn't really say yes at all.
Yeah.
And then I remember I had an interview situation that went quite badly. And I think had I said yes, maybe the barriers which I faced would have been, the organization may have been alerted to them a lot better, and that may have resulted in a different outcome. So now, most recently, when I've applied for the past 2 or 3 jobs, I've always said yes, that this is what I've had. But very much early on, it was a quite difficult. Um, there was a lot of tension there between whether to do it or not.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that because I actually thought you were going to say something different altogether. So that's it's a really interesting you answered that because I was thinking you might be scared to do it because they wouldn't give you an interview, thinking, oh, this might be too different. I mean, obviously they wouldn't be thinking that, but you might as well, or other people might, or that I'm going to be too difficult for them. So if I click yes, so I'm just going to say no, so I fit in with the pack. But actually, it's quite the opposite, isn't it? What you're saying that you were worried that you were perhaps given an interview on the because of it, and it's that would have almost given you it's almost like it would have given you unfair advantage, or that you were put in a position that you weren't ready for, or something like that. And it's just interesting that you said that because I on it, not coming from a disability myself, I wasn't really certain what the reservations were around that, but it certainly wasn't what I was thinking, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's something which I did wrestle with because again, and this is something else which I feel needs to be kind of said almost,
Yeah.
is that many websites that the adverts are kind of put out on for teachers. I think there are a couple out there that really need to consider this option. Like there are some out there that don't even have that
No.
as something to inform schools about or colleges about. So if you apply on their website, for example, the college has no idea or the school has no idea about the applicant's kind of context, history, or barriers that they've faced. Now, whether that has to be there, whether that makes somebody with disability confident or not, that's a whole another conversation. But I
Mm.
think at the moment, because of the amount, so we have several different platforms, right, that
Yeah.
individuals use to apply on. If one kind of allows it, another one doesn't, and then you have another one there that's not even recognizing it, it then becomes difficult for disabled persons to then navigate that, because it's like, okay, which one do they go to now to look for jobs? Because now if they go to one that doesn't have that as an option,
Yeah.
like you said, some may think in that way too, that, oh, they're not going to take me on because of XYZ.
Mm.
Whereas others may think, well, how will I tell them about the barriers that I face? So
Yes.
as an example, if in the past couple of years when I've applied and I've ticked the box and I've said yes, I do have like a disability, and explained what it was, accommodations have been made for me
Yes.
when I get to interview. Whereas others that don't even have that, if I get to interview and they want me to do a presentation in a room that I've not been in before,
Mm.
I'm going to be completely lost, Chris, honestly, because
Yeah.
I've as another example, right? When I joined an organization in the past, and I was given my teaching room, the teaching room had a ledge, right?
All
And now
right.
because of my peripheral vision being lower, I didn't recognize where the floor was and where that kind of drop was within the room, and
Yeah.
that caused me some quite significant difficulty. So, how will into prospective schools or colleges know about accommodation and ensuring that the room is actually ready for the individual? It's as much as it is about the candidate as it is of the school, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. And do you think that the framework that you're looking to improve, do you think that would include something on recruitment so that there's more standardized approach to applications, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
that's a key part of what it is that I really want to put out there, in that recruiters, regardless of the platform they're all using, there should be some sort of standard choice of if you were invited to interview or something, if you were a prospective candidate, do you have any needs that need to be met, and those um that aspect.
Yeah. And again, is there anything unreasonable in what you're saying? No. I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah, I hope not.
no, but perhaps maybe it would encourage more people to apply from disabilities, and knowing that they're going to be catered for and that they get equal treatment, so that they can put forward their best selves on the day like everybody else, really. So yeah, that's really 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 insightful. So thank you for that, Hassan. I'm just wondering as well, just given the fact that you talked about being in a coaching role now, I would imagine you do a lot of professional development, so a lot of CPD. Has your partial sightedness influenced your professional development as well? You kind of touched on it earlier, but is there any unique perspectives you think that's been has brought you to your leadership style as well because of it?
Yeah, I think what it has done, and this is so interesting in that I think it goes back to that point about being stubborn, right?
Yeah.
That I think it has, in some cases, actually led to me. So here's the thing, right? If I'm in a room and I'm delivering a presentation or kind of teaching, um, I can't really, because of the partial sightedness that I have, I
Mm.
can't really see everyone within the room. But what I can see is at least where the room ends,
Yes.
right? And for myself, like voice projection is so important when you're in those sorts of environments.
Yeah.
And I feel like because I'm conscious of the fact that people may feel that I'm not really addressing them or looking at them because I physically can't do that.
Yeah.
So I have to almost like elevate my voice further to try and ensure that it's reaching everyone around me. Um, and it has like led to some other difficult. So as again, it's something else that maybe it's for consideration, right? I know many teachers and leaders out there and coaches and those in pedagogy and everything else.
Mm.
I know they love mini whiteboards,
Yeah.
right? And that's used in CPD and everywhere else. But that's not really something that a person like myself can use
Mm.
because I can't actually see what's being written on them.
I love mini whiteboards. I love to use them in my class, and it's not something that I would have even again thought of. It features nearly every lesson for me, a mini whiteboard, in one way, shape, or form. Now, if I had a partially sighted student, then maybe they would have to address that with me, wouldn't they? They would have to say, "Look, Chris, this isn't working for me," and we would go a different way. But I use them all the time, and I would never have thought of that.
Yeah,
um
so as a resource, like it's not something which no, not to say that obviously with yourself, like I'm sure it works wonderfully for you and others around, like I've seen. But then
yeah,
so in terms of professional development, I have to now find other ways in which I can
of
get
course,
around that.
of
So for
course.
example, like using things like Poll Everywhere as an example, where people can scan in and then they put their words on, into the device and then it comes up on the board in front of me so I
Yeah.
can see what everyone's kind of put down there.
Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense. I mean, I guess you're talking about professional development with staff. I'm talking about students. I guess it's not quite the same thing, but in the same time, it's a room full of people who are in some way getting developed. So I guess there's some overlap between them. But yeah, I would never have thought of that. But it's a really good point, and I just yeah. And do you find that I mean, obviously the people in your college, they're very familiar with you because I imagine you do a lot of professional development and they're just
Mm.
accustomed to it. Do you ever do external professional development where we have to sort of immediately address this? And how do you feel about doing that?
Sorry, could you ask the question again, please? Sorry.
So to know when it comes to external professional development, do you ever do any of that?
Meaning receive external professional development.
Yeah, just with people maybe cross college or cross college professional development with
Yeah,
people
so
outside the college.
I've been quite fortunate again because the any kind of cross college or external kind of development that gets done, um, that's been done so far for me while in my current role, the provider or the external provider would usually ask my line manager or anyone else if there's anybody who's participating which has needs.
Okay.
And then once I've kind of informed them of that, then it gets adjusted or adapted for myself. And I've had slides printed off for me and given to me and everything else. And the data that's being used, for example, it's much more enlarged, so I can actually access and see it.
Yeah, and again, perhaps as you've just said there, you perhaps may be lucky that you've had that question asked, but is that something that should be in the framework so that it is asked every time, everywhere?
Yeah, no, exactly. Because prior to this role, I've not come across that once.
Yeah, exactly. So this framework has got quite a bit going in that really will raise the standards everywhere, really, won't they? So that's and that's obviously the point of this, isn't it? So what I'm going to do, Afsan, we've got to go to one final. We've got to go to our sponsors one final time. But what I would like to do, just when we return, just for the final couple of minutes, is just get your reflections on, what the most valuable lessons you've had as a partial sight leader, and just any advice or tips you could give practitioners who may be in this position, or is another disability that you think that you can speak for as well. So we'll be one moment and then we'll return back to that.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Well, thank you very much for tonight, Afsan. I think you've been very, very insightful, and I really hope that there's, that we can speak again on a future show where you can tell me everything that you've managed to get into the framework. I really hope that's where we are in the not too distant future. So just to wrap up tonight, and just to really sort of circle things off here, how do you feel? In terms of your reflecting on your career, what's the most valuable lessons that you've learned as a partially sighted leader?
I think number one is resilience.
Yeah.
I think it's so crucial. And again, I come back to that story, right, of tripping over or not being in a room that's accessible for myself.
Yeah.
And literally, honestly, Chris, like sat on the floor and thinking to myself, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And thinking back to all those moments where I was a student and where there were other SEN students around me, and thinking that no, I have to continue. I have to go on.
Absolutely.
Because if we don't, who will? So that's what I feel is as a kind of like an overall reflection for that is really having that strong sense of resiliency, and then moving ourselves into a position of agency and power. Because if we're not at the table, we're not having these discussions, who's going to speak on our behalf, right? So I think that those are some reflections that I have regarding that.
Yeah, and the way you word that, it's absolutely right what you're saying, and there can't be anybody listening to this thinking, he's not wrong. So he's not right. we've got to be sitting here thinking and anyone listening to this can only be inspired by your journey and hoping that your journey hasn't finished yet in terms of what you can achieve, not just for yourself but for everybody else as well. And I don't know, I just think, listen to it, I can't help but think you've got to be the most inspiring guest I've had on the show, and I am just so happy that you chose to be on the show and to share the story with us. I just, I was going to ask you what you hope listeners will take away from the conversation, but I actually, I think, I'm going to field that for you if you don't mind, because I just think, I just want to sort of tell you what I've got from it, and hopefully I'm speaking on behalf of the listeners as well. So I think that, in terms of what listeners can take away from the show, is that there has to be a framework update, and it has to accommodate, not just partially sighted teachers, but people of all disabilities, where there is an opportunity for the framework to be more accommodating to them, whether that be with recruitment, whether that be professional development, or just in-class support. And I think there has to, from what you're saying, there's a huge opportunity for yourself and anybody else who you take on your journey with you to really inspire the framework here. And I just really, really wish the best for you, really, in terms of what you hope to achieve. Do you think that's a fair reflection?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There has to be a change, and I think just one message I'd like to put out there, for leaders and others who are in a position of power: give your high needs teachers agency.
Agency.
Yeah, give them that autonomy to really help and support and mold and develop your own professional areas.
Yeah, couldn't have put it better myself. And perhaps maybe one day it won't just be you saying that, but there'll be a framework in place to actually say that instead. So what can you promise me one thing though, Afsan? Can you promise me that you will come back on the show in the future and tell me all about it? Tell me what you've achieved.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Absolutely, fingers crossed. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. Taking time out of your busy life. You said you've got 2 children, so I can imagine you come home to just as much chaos as you have at at work, and I'm in the same position myself. And yet we still find time to talk about the things that are passionate to us. And I really do appreciate everything you've had to say tonight. And again, I wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you, Chris.
So thank you very much. So that tonight was the Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time for another show. And until then, have a great summer. Great summer? Don't have a great summer. Summer's over. Have a great term. Thank you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.